joining me again. Just thinking how weird this whole place is, this whole experience. Do you ever wonder yourself, like what is this place? Like, why am I here? What does it all mean? I think everyone does at some point. Well, I certainly do. I do it on a daily basis pretty much. It's just so strange. The bodies we're in, the planet we're on, the universe we're in. Just so many questions, so confusing, and that is partly why I research this topic, because it is a way for me to find some of these answers. You don't get all the answers, and sometimes they're contrasting answers, which makes it even more confusing. But at the same time, there is a general trend in terms of research on these experiences that point me in a direction that at least makes me be a little bit more comfortable in the situation I'm in, and hopefully it does the same for you. But everyone's going to get something different out of these experiences, so for whatever reason you're listening, it doesn't matter. Thank you for joining me, and let's get into today's experience. Okay, this one is from a man called Robert T, experience 7,343. I was diagnosed as terminal and in and out of consciousness for several weeks. I had been told there was no hope. I had been told there was no help on too many planes to explain here. Regardless, I was in 39 days into a 30-day life expectancy. I weighed not only the opportunity for assistance, but the practicality of it all as well. I slept for hours during the days and nights. I was sicker than sick. My doctors later explained that that was the sickest any human being could ever be. I was at the very doorway of death in both mind and body. Most of my memories of those days are limited, to say the least, as are the recollections of any dreams. Dreams were just seemingly non-existent for me, and honestly still are rare today. But the one memory and events surrounding it marked a definitive turning point for me, and still remains as the most vivid experience of my life. It also marks the most defining crossroads of my life as well. I assumed at the time that it was a dream. Nothing in my frame of reference could explain the details or content to me. At this time, the dream just seemed so real. Realer than real, wetter than water. The realest thing to this date that I have ever encountered in my life. It wouldn't be until 3 years later that I was further enlightened as to what the meaning of this dream that I had actually was. It was, in fact, no dream. It's long and detailed, so decide now if the 10 minutes it'll take to read is worth your time. This is a deeply personal experience for me, and there are lessons in it for everyone, especially my family. It was not easy to write this information onto this page. I have to love myself to place myself in the range of skeptics and doubters. Heck, I was one of them. Before you label me weird, which I am okay with, by the way, I ask that you read this experience without any predetermined beliefs or judgments. Here is my near-death experience. I found myself in an open expanse of darkness. Oddly, it surrounded me, and even odder was I could seemingly see 360 degrees without turning my head. I just knew it was endless. There was a noise, or maybe best stated, a vibration or humming noise. The noise didn't scare me. Rather, it seemingly calmed me down. In the distance, there was a soft and peaceful reddish glow. It grew larger and larger. It seemed red, but as it got close, it appeared peach-coloured, pink, and even orange. To this date, describing the colours is still difficult for me because I can't say I have ever experienced colours so vivid and brilliant, almost like the phases of a cloud clustered in the sunset or sunrise, when the colours evolve with the slipping sun and reflecting onto the clouds. I didn't move, but could certainly feel the glow getting larger and larger, as if I were rushing to it without effort. There was no tunnel, as some report. The glow emanated from what appeared to be the lip, or what I perceived as like the edge of a volcano, for lack of a better previous memory recall. It is almost ineffable to describe, so I tried to piece it together with the framework of my current memory databanks. It was like a volcano with the edge slightly curved but definitely rounding in each direction to an expanse that seemed limitless. Suddenly I was on the edge. My feet dangled so far over the edge that it would seemingly be impossible to maintain balance. But that wasn't a problem. I felt weightless and at great peace. The glow of red now seemed pinkish and orange and was clearly not a volcano. As I peered over my toes, there was no end below, nor was there an end to the lip or the darkness around me. It was a void. There was no heat or lava, just a harmonic hum and a specific odor that I didn't recognize. I remember thinking, I don't ever recall smelling anything in a dream. The smell I could actually taste, like after a thunderstorm. That crisp but refreshed smell, almost like ammonia lightly, but I later realized it was like the smell of an ozone machine almost, but crisper. The edge of the glow expanse curved out of the view endlessly, making me realize or know there was no end to it. It was not the mouth of a volcano. It was obviously too expansive, but it did bend. I wasn't frightened. I wasn't confused either. In fact, I was at the greatest peace of my life, and I've known it to this day. My feet were 3/4 of the way over the edge. Without any hesitation, a bright, light-shaped ball or mass appeared before me. It seemed just out of reach, although I didn't try to touch it. Like a giant ball of light swirling into itself, it was rotating in nearly every direction. It was highlighted by blue streaks as it seemingly swirled in every direction. It wasn't perfectly round. It appeared almost jagged and occasionally squeezed into almost a thick donut shape structure of pure energy. When this happened, I could see what appeared to be the center of a whirlpool, for lack of a better term, where it all seemed to merge. In the center was a darker blue-black center. Everything seemed to go there and disappeared with streaks of light. As soon as I focused on this center, it began to distort and glow brighter with streaks of blue that began to outline the shape of a face emerging. The massive light increased in brightness continually, but yet it didn't make me squint or shield my eyes. It made me feel better and more peaceful as it grew in intensity. As the light intensified, so did the harmony of it and vibration. Suddenly, there was a definitive and energized face of a man. He was older and weathered in appearance. The face only appeared and consumed the massive light. The high points and low points of detail were expressed in tones of light. High points more bluish, his hair was longer and had gentle waves, not tight but rolling down past what I assumed were his shoulders but unseen. He looked somewhat familiar, or felt familiar, I should say. There was a burst or vibration from him that I could feel down to the very core of my body. This vibration was the most comforting energy that I have ever felt. It was like a summer breeze caressing your face without a care in the world. I no longer felt pain, as in my awakened state, which had been intense. I felt the greatest peace to the extent of nothing I had ever experienced. The man, with no facial hair to speak of, but the weathered look on his face was clearly defined in tone. Then there were words. There was no speaking, as the man's lips never moved, nor did mine, but there were words. There was a question. Are you ready? Vague but decisive, and I felt no ambiguity as to its meaning. I replied, but yet my lips didn't move, and I have no memory of actually speaking. I replied, no, I'm not ready yet. This in and of itself was odd, because I had already given up and was ready to die in my awakened state and body. Then there were a few more words. There is something important you still need to do. At the same time I felt these words, a smile began to form on the man's face, and more rays of light began to shoot out of nearly every part of his face. I reached for his face, unafraid but exploring, without thought. I reached for his face and placed my hands on his cheek. I had originally thought he would have been well out of reach, suspended over the expanse, but he wasn't. I realized the pink, red, orange, peach-colored glow was gone, and all that remained was the light, radiant light from the orb, continually increasing in brightness and hum. I reached out slowly and deliberately. I touched his cheek. My body vibrated, and the light grew again in intensity and brightness as his smile expanded. It was brighter than the sun, but not yellow, a pure white. This touch lasted for what seemed like forever, yet it was quick. It's hard to find words to describe the sense of time I experienced. As the light became brighter, so did the hum and the vibration. His smile widened until it distorted the image of his face. I felt as if I was falling, but I hadn't moved. Then suddenly there were valleys, mountains, streams, and small specks of numerous people and animals in the expanse below me. It was a brief but complete vision of a peaceful place, void of definable colour, and the greatest source of peace I had ever felt, still to this day. The entire field of view became this white light, and I felt weightless as it engulfed me. There was a sense of speed somehow as I felt what seemed like my body travelling at speeds blurring my view. Within seconds, I awoke at my hospital bed. I was scared, but yet peaceful. I remember thinking, volcano. I immediately assumed my encounter was a dream, yet somehow I knew it wasn't a dream deep inside me. Within minutes of this experience, I purposely and incessantly asked to see all of my doctors at the same time, and without effort, it happened. There were exactly 12 of them. I asked each to speak their mind and explain my options and chances. Each did with fluent, quick responses, and I looked in the eyes of each as they spoke. I was focused and attentive. I felt things coming from each of them, it seemed, but I couldn't understand it all. They all looked at me oddly, as if wondering where my control had suddenly come from, considering my nearly comatose state since my arrival. I spoke to them as a group and told them I had to live. I told them specifically that there was something important I was supposed to do, and this day marked the beginning of a life-saving treatment that would take nearly 3 years and lead me to this moment today. There were several hurdles in those 3 years, including a 2-month stint in a hospice that I miraculously got better in and exited accordingly, still unexplained by my doctors. What I had recognized in my daily struggles was that there were distinct differences in my character and habits and viewpoints along the way. I just assumed I was grateful to be alive, but I documented the strange changes in personality as I recognized them. In retrospect, the list grew to nearly 15 pages of changes I had realized. The list grows still to this day. Around Christmas of 2013, nearly 3 years later, as I neared what appeared to be the end of my battle, I received a calendar, as usual, at Christmas from my mother, with several pictures on it she had made. It was a ritual in my family to get this calendar every Christmas from Mum. We all look forward to it, and it is a staple of each of our homes all year, without fail. We all fought for the cover, as we call it. It's been a tradition and passion for my mum for some time now. By the way, we still jokingly jockey for the cover photo each and every year. As I scanned the calendar, I came across a picture of a man. Instantly, I was weakened and literally fell back in my seat. I was stunned. My breath was stolen from me instantly. The man on that calendar was the same face in the giant mass of light I had experienced at death's door in my dream. The same face, but I still didn't know who it was. The man, I was told, once I could muster the question, was my grandfather. He had died in 1956, well before my birth, and as a result had never been a part of my life, in detail, in person, or in pictures. There was no possible way I could recognize this man, as I had never even seen a photo of him. Nor had I any direct knowledge of his life or character previously. This was the day I realized that my dream was directly influenced by someone already departed. In the next few months, I discovered the near-death experience and its history in our society. I was never a believer in these events, as perceptual prejudice dictated otherwise. A mass delusion, I would often say to myself. However, it was clear to me at this point that my dream was in fact a near-death experience. But I hadn't actually died. Or had I? Well, this is where the world changed once again for me. This started happening. I couldn't get enough information and still have an insatiable desire for information. Theories of things pop into my mind on topics I previously never cared about. Oddly, I couldn't and still can't read others' near-death experiences. Just couldn't seem to do it and still can't. But what I was insatiable about was the recorded and well documented and researched after effects. I compared my recorded after effects to several lists developed by researchers and scientists. As you can imagine, the changes I documented were almost exactly the same as millions of near-death experiences around the world. This realization happened almost 3 years from the actual event. Exactly the time frame recorded in research as the time frame the majority of near-death experiences go through until their awakening or realization of the event and acceptance of the same. Without trying, I had evolved to a higher consciousness. I had changed, just like the others had, at exactly the same period as the others. I had assumed you had to die to have these experiences prior, and I had heard, like you, about these experiences. Come to find out you don't actually have to die to have a near-death experience. It's a near-death experience. I previously wrote them off to some metabolic brain malfunction at the time of death, I guess. It's a death illusion. I was not a believer. However, I am now, obviously. The near-death experience is different for each of us. They are not all typical, but the after effects and the brain shift and timing are identical. Skeptics can't ignore each experience and rationalize it in any way they want. But they can't ignore, but they can't ignore millions of people who change all at once in mass numbers after a moment like this. It's hard for us to change anything about ourselves, let alone major shifts in personality. That's just unexplained for most, but not for near-death experiences. Since my awakening, I research, I read and learn and learn and read. It's not all near-death experience stuff, very little in fact. It's things like quantum physics, science. I have theories which I don't ask for on topics I should care nothing about, that they just pop into my head 100 times a day. I had six senses that took some time that took me some time in seclusion to control and understand. Epiphanies of life's greatest questions, and some questions I never even considered. Sometimes they flow with such ease that I often just burst into laughter. Most importantly, a love for others I simply can't ignore. Then there's the calling. We all experience the same calling, which is to do better for mankind in some way. In fact, it seems it's the only question I can't answer in life, is the one thing said in my near-death experience. I am supposed to do something important. This remains the carrot that I will forever chase, and I am perfectly okay with that. I have found that the path of life is easy when I understand that everything and everyone along it is not there for a reason, but a purpose. Everything. It's free will that allows me to choose what I want to pay attention to. There is oneness to the universe. There is a single common component to everything and every person, right down to each atom. It's energy. The foundations of the universe and the epiphanies I see every day are too numerous and mind-numbing to go into. I'll spare you the details. I just know things now, and I don't ask or seek it. I just know. It just comes to me. I am not alone with this. It happens to most of us who have had a near-death experience. The question still remains, what do I do with it? I have a pretty good idea. I will write, share, and find peace in the fact that change is up to the individual. It's free will, and it's ours to choose. But I will share it. I do realize the fact that my guide through my near-death experience was a family member with a message for many in my family. The fact that it was someone I had never known due to an early death is not the message. The fact that I didn't know that branch of my family well is the message. The divisions in some limbs of my family tree have been withered, and I know why. I also know someone wants it changed. I do not take this responsibility on myself. One of my callings was to share this experience with my family and others, and I consider that mission now complete. I have learned that love can do many things. The love and commitment from my family got me here today. I learned that love from past family members showed me the light of that love from beyond. The experience changed me greatly, and I researched my theories on change. One thing was for clear. Change doesn't happen yesterday. It's about forgiveness, and they showed me that too. I will share them as I go. There are too many things to talk about regarding lessons from beyond. I feel that if you attach a new idea to great emotion, just maybe it impacts people and causes similar brain shifts. At a minimum, it provokes thought for others. I will post the research material that discusses the after effects next. I hope you enjoyed one of the most humbling experiences of my life. It takes a lot to bleed all over these pages in the manner I just did. It's never too late to make a change in family. In the end, it's all about family. Today, I am cancer-free with the rest of my life ahead of me. I understand the flow of life and the universe and think it's funny actually how easy it really is. I have no fear of death, as death is the prize actually. I also realize one irrefutable thing to be true. There is always life, even after death. The energy that keeps us alive goes somewhere. It goes everywhere. But that very energy that powered the person in life is the same energy that seeps into our very mind daily. We miss them, but they are right there all the time. There is always life. Don't waste a minute. Not one single minute of life. Reap it. And that's the end of his experience. So a couple of things there, just before I go through it again. Just that experience didn't exactly roll off the tongue for me, so it might have been a little bit confusing in patches, which is why we'll go through it again and give it a little bit more analysis. But yeah, it also was not your typical experience in that it wasn't. It seems from the way from what we just read that this experience he has written for family members. It's his way of sharing what happened to him with closer members of his family, and it seems that he has decided to go a step further and actually publish this experience for the general public, for you and me to be able to listen to and read and learn from. It's frustrating because at the end there, he says that there's so many lessons that he has learnt from this other dimension that unfortunately he says something like there's too many to mention, and he can't really be bothered writing about it here. He says something like he will tell his family members about this when they catch up for a family reunion, which obviously doesn't help us because we're not family, and we can't be there to actually hear what he's learnt from this other dimension. Because for me, although what happens visually and experientially is really interesting, for me it's much more interesting when these people who have near-death experiences start to get some questions answered and wisdom. But yeah, it's interesting how he has started to research things like quantum physics and really sounds like he's getting into the nuts and bolts of how I guess we as humans work and the universe in general, and it's not so much about loving each other, although at the end there he does mention, um, he says that love can do many things, but that's about the only mention of love in this experience, which every one of these experiences are different. Sometimes they will go into a lot more depth in terms of what this love means and how it can benefit us all in this dimension, but that's okay. That's what these experiences are like. They're also unique and varied. That it's like it's a unique experience for each individual when they cross over, and everyone's going to have a slightly different one. So Robert starts out saying he's sick. He doesn't actually mention cancer, but I'm assuming that's what it is. He's given 30 days to live, and he has this, what he calls dream, but for those of you who listen to this podcast on a regular basis, it's pretty clear what he happens to him is generally considered what is commonly termed a near-death experience, because it has all the elements there. You know, meeting a deceased loved one, an experience with the light, a feeling of bliss, and this is what happens to him. But at the time it's happening, he doesn't really he'd heard of near-death experiences, but never taken too much notice of him and kind of brushed them off. So when he has this experience, when he's on his deathbed, this is what he chalks it down to. It is a dream. The interesting part is that he actually goes into a fair bit of depth here as to the realness or the reality of this experience. To him, it's more real than this life we experience now, this physical world. It's way more real. So it goes beyond a dream. It's beyond even what we experience in this physical reality. And it goes to that next level where it's impossible for us to really understand what he means by this, because for you and me, the experience we are having right now is as real as it gets, and to think there's another dimension where it can get even more real is mind-boggling. But he says it's realer than real. It's wetter than water. So I like that. It's wetter than water. So it's a good little analogy there for us to kind of get a glimpse into what Robert experiences. So he has this experience, and it takes 3 whole years before he actually joins the dots and says, okay, so what happened to me was a near-death experience. And he says he's quite reluctant to share what has happened to him because of the usual fears that you might want to label him weird or crazy. But he's at a place in his life now where he's okay with being judged. So this is what actually happened during the experience. He's obviously lying there on his deathbed, pretty much counting down the minutes till he passes on. The doctors have said he is, as sick as a person can get. I've seen people in a state that he is describing in this experience. I'm sure a few of you listening have as well. And you're pretty much at that point where you're at a loved one's deathbed and you are waiting for them to pass. It's when you see someone in that state, they're not breathing properly. there's no cognition at all. They're literally just laying there in a comatose state. Obviously not comatose because they're still breathing for themselves, but they're they're very unwell, and you can just sort of tell. And this is the place he is in at now, as in this physical realm. And suddenly, he is no longer experiencing this suffering. He finds himself in an open expanse. He says there was no tunnel to speak of. It was just 1 minute he's in this physical realm and the next he's in another dimension. He says one of the first things he notices when he crosses through to this dimension is he no longer sees in 3 dimensions. It's not just two eyes at the front of his head giving him the visual experience, but he can see in every direction, not just back, front, left, right, but up and down as well. So it's totally different way of experiencing reality when they cross over from so many points of view. But obviously, the way you see it is going to be amazing. It's another part of these experiences that I can't really begin to even imagine or describe what that would be like. I'll leave that to you to use your imagination as to how you would articulate someone experiencing the world in a 360-degree way from a visual perspective. I like it how he now then goes in from what he can see into what he can hear. So he's still experiencing senses, but in this situation, from the hearing point of view, what he hears is a vibration or a humming noise, and he says, "Look, this wasn't a scary noise. It just had, in fact, the opposite effect. It started to calm him down." And then in this darkness, where he hears this humming, he starts to see something in the distance, and it's like a reddish glow, and it starts to grow larger and larger. And then he starts to see a few more colors in this glow. It gets a little bit pink and a little bit orange. And I kind of like how he describes this. He says it's kind of like when you watch a sunset or a sunrise and you see when there's clouds near that sun, well, I guess there doesn't even need to be clouds near it, but just the whole color of that horizon can shift from these sort of colors, pink to red to orange, and it's quite spectacular. So this is what he is seeing, and this is where it got a little bit confusing for me when I was reading it. But the crux of it is he is seeing something, I guess, which looks like he is on the edge of a volcano. So he's walking right to the lip of this volcano, and he can see this huge sort of circular area in front of him, and he's able to look down. And when he does, when he looks down into this volcano-like structure, he sees that it goes on forever. And now, and as he does this, he kind of starts to realize he also still has his sense of smell. And he says, "Oh, hang on a second. I don't remember ever actually experiencing smell in a dream. Come to think of it, I don't think I have ever experienced smell in a dream either." But he says that this smell is very specific. He really remembers this part of the experience. He says the smell is so intense he can pretty much taste it. So he's looking over the edge and he says it goes on forever, but at the same time, he's not really surprised or frightened by this, what he's seeing and smelling and tasting. In fact, he puts his feet 3/4 of the way over the edge. It's interesting that he uses the word feet there. Like, it still seems that he has some form, some sort of physical form in this other dimension. Um, and as he's looking over the edge with these feet dangling over the edge, then he sees a light, and it's shaped as a ball or a mass, and it's right there in front of him. He says there's blue streaks coming out of it, and it's swirling around, and sometimes it appears jagged and other times smooth, and it can kind of morph into different shapes, like it turns into a donut at one point, and it's just swirling around, just a bit like what you see when you see a whirlpool, he says. And then the light starts to morph into a physical human-like form, and he says this form was older, a little bit, weathered and aged in appearance. He can see what this man really looks like now, and it's quite a vivid image for him, but he doesn't know who it is at this point. But he is feeling love or higher vibrations coming from this being, and they are permeating his being as well. So he's in a very peaceful state. Uh, he feels like he doesn't have a care in the world anymore. This being is creating a presence that takes all his negativity away, including any pain he did have. Then this being talks to him, and his amazement, to Robert, the guy having the experience, to his surprise, this man doesn't have to use his mouth to talk. He hears the words, but notices his lips don't move and mouth doesn't open. It's like he did say something, but without needing to do it from the lungs and the mouth. It's a telepathic type communication. The voice says to him, "Are you ready?" And then Robert doesn't really say what this is supposed to mean, but he replies, "Look, no, I'm not ready yet." So I don't know. I guess this is the being, the light being, asking him, "Are you ready to die?" And I think that's what the question is implying here. And Robert says, "No, not ready yet." So the light being says, "Good, then there's some important things you still need to do." And that's all. That's all he says. They have this. That's as far as he goes into detail as to what this conversation was actually about. So he feels that when he says, "No, I want to come back," and this light being says, "Good, there's some more things you need to do," that this being then starts to smile, and light just starts to shoot out of every part of his face, and then the being seems to morph back into this orb of light and disappear. The physical form is no longer there. It's just gone back to what it was before it changed into the human. So that just says to me, when we are in this other dimension, and we are these beings that we were before we came to Earth, we're able to pretty much take any form we like. And as we see later on in this experience, that it's actually turns out to be this being that has appeared to him in this dimension, to Robert, is actually his dead grandfather who he never met and hadn't even seen a photo of, and happens to come across this photo one day, and he recognizes the face, and he says, wow, this is the same guy who appeared to me in my near-death experience. It's my grandfather that I never met. So this being who has morphed into his dead grandfather and now back into this orb of light is continuing to generate these kind of vibrations that are giving Robert some love or negative free experience, high vibration type experience, and it feels good for him. He's still experiencing the hum and the vibration of the place, and after this experience with his dead grandfather, he then looks down into the volcano again, and he sees a physical landscape, an earth-like environment. There's valleys, there's mountains, rivers, streams, and even a few people and animals, and it just looks like a very serene place and divine place to be. And after he sees this environment is when the experience comes to an end. So he he wakes up and he feels scared, but still a little bit peaceful. So no major shock for him to be back in his body, but it's not as pleasant as the place he was just in, but doesn't go into too much detail there. And then he remembers as soon as he wakes up, he reflects on the word volcano and what that means to him. And he kind of thinks at this point, because this is straight after his experience, what just happened to me? Was that a dream or was that real? I've never had anything like that before. How do I describe exactly what that was? It felt great, felt so real, but at the same time, it was not of this physical dimension. So what was it? And he doesn't know, but he kind of just describes it as a dream at this point. But somewhere deep inside of him, he knows that dream is not really an adequate way to describe this experience. In fact, this world we live in now is more like a dream in comparison to the place he was just in. Then, funny thing happens next. He decides to instantly and incessantly ask to see all of his doctors, and there's 12 of them. He calls them all in, and he looks them all in the eye, and he tells them, look, you've got to get me better. I want to live. You've got to do everything you can, and I am willing to put in the long yards. Just make sure I survive this condition that I have. And he says that this meeting is good. He looks the doctors in the eye. He's able to kind of read each one of them with greater detail that he was ever able to do before this experience. So what that actually means, I don't know. Is he reading their thoughts? It sounds to me like it's going a bit beyond reading body language and facial gestures. It's picking some sort of other energy up from these individuals. But anyway, he says it goes well, and this meeting is the beginning of a 3-year journey for him to get better. So this shows how sick he was, and he says he was even in hospice for 2 months and miraculously got better. This reminds me of a story I'll share with you now about someone in the aged care I work at. This resident was, she wants to die. And, whenever I go into a room where we talk about um, death, she's heading towards the end of her life. She can't really see anymore. She's losing her mobility, but she's very cognitive and she can understand conversation, and we can have a good talk still. But just about every time I go in there, she wants to cross over. She's not too sure what is awaiting her, and in fact probably a little bit skeptical of any continuation of life, despite my efforts to try and convince her otherwise. She this is what she believes, and that's fine. And I don't try to convince her. I just tell her what I believe too. So um, for her, she's just had enough of this life. She's got to the point where the suffering's too much, and she's ready to cease existing in this physical realm. So anyway, so what happened was she started getting very sick a few weeks ago, and to the point where she actually just passed out on the toilet, and we got the nurses and the paramedics involved, and she got taken to hospital, and in hospital she was told, look, if you don't get this treatment, you're going to pass away. And she said, great, don't let me, don't give it to me, just let me pass on peacefully. So all her grandkids and children came in and said some goodbyes, and they they said they went in there fully expecting this to be the final farewell, and then they took this lady to a hospice, which is obviously a place where they make you comfortable as you pass on. And miraculously, just like in this experience I'm reading now, she recovered, and now she is back in the aged care, and she's still not really wanting to be there, and kind of a bit confused as to why that wasn't it, and she was all ready to go. And it does happen, these miraculous type interventions. In this case, though, in the example I just gave, she didn't want it to happen, but it just shows that us as we still lack a lot of understanding as to how this human body works, and our interventions are still a long way off perfect, and our understanding of how the body is keeps going. It's obviously improved a lot, but it's much better than it was 100, 200 years ago, and the life expectancy of humans has pretty much doubled over the last 100, 150 years. So, we're tracking in the right direction, but we've still got a long way to go. So I just had a phone call, and I'm kind of lost as to what exactly I was talking about, but I believe it was something to do with people going to hospice and miraculously recovering, and I think I finished pretty much all I had to say about that. So let's continue on through Robert's experience. So he says, so then he starts talking about when he actually sees this calendar, and on this calendar is a photo of a man who he saw in his experience, and he is absolutely blown away, as you would be. He feels like he's met this person he's seeing in this picture in a dimension where life seems even more real than it does here. So he instantly recognizes who this guy is in terms of his facial features, but doesn't have a clue about his story because this guy never even mentions who he was when he meets him in the other realm. So eventually he finds out that this man was in fact his grandfather that died when he was really young, so he never got to meet him, never even seen a picture of him, which is a little bit unusual, I guess. Depends what era this experience was written and how exposed. But even still, even if it was like in the 80s or 90s, there's less photos back then than there are today, because today they're everywhere. They're on your phones, and people have a camera 24/7. But photos, even though they weren't as common back then, they're still around, and you would have thought this guy would have seen a photo of his granddad, but maybe not, especially if um, he wasn't close to his parents. If if there was some sort of family rift there, it's possible there was no photo. And you kind of get the gist as this experience goes on that potentially there is sort of some family tension. And he mentions this throughout the experience, that he is kind of trying to heal the rifts, and that's part of the reason he's actually sharing this experience as a way of healing whatever is going on in his family. But it doesn't really go into why he hasn't even seen a photo of his granddad, only to say that he never has. Then he talks about his exposure to near-death experiences and his belief in them. Like I said at the start, he has heard about them but never really paid them too much attention, and then he kind of starts joining the dots and realizes that this is in fact what he has had, and he starts to get a real appetite to research these himself, but he doesn't go into the actual part of or the area of exploring other people's experiences. In fact, it's the opposite. Um, he's quite put off by what other people say about these experiences, which is very odd. Obviously from my perspective, because I'm quite the opposite, and I can't get enough of hearing how other people experience this other realm. But in his case, this is who he is. This is his journey. For him, it's not about what other people have gone through. He's been there himself. He doesn't really, I guess, need to hear other people's opinions and experiences, because he's had a taste himself and knows what it's like. I guess that could be one kind of rationale for that. And because of this, I guess, is a reason why he investigates other aspects of near-death experiences. So by not focusing on what other people are going through and what they've seen and felt and heard and what wisdom they've received, he has decided to put his energy into researching a side of which is of the near death, which is the after effect, rather than the actual experience itself. And for those of you who are regular listeners, they would know that often people will come back with increased empathy, sometimes increased sensitivity to electricity, but generally speaking, just change who they are as people. They will more than likely pursue a life path or journey closer to embracing love and helping mankind and being more of service. And he says for him, I guess he says for him, this is the proof that the near death experience is real. Like, you can try and explain what happens during that period of detachment from the body as some kind of brain malfunction, he says, but for him, the biggest proof is the after effects, and these after effects can't be written off as some sort of physical malfunction. It's the person has changed, and this says to me and to him that what they go through is real. It's realer than real, and they come back and try to use what has happened to them as fuel to make their life more productive and aligned with values that they learned from the other dimension. So he also looks at the quantum side of things, not just the after effects. He says that he has these weird, rare topics just pop into his head like 100 times a day, and he just contemplates life's big questions. That is something he never really used to analyze. He just was quite happy living his life, but now he contemplates um, the meaning of everything, and I can relate to that too. Like I was saying at the start of this episode, like, why are we here? Like, isn't this place weird? Like, what, why, and how? It's confusing, to say the least, to be a human, knowing that there is all these beings or this consciousness right in front of your face that has all the answers to all these questions we have, but for whatever reason it's made more difficult. It's difficult to obtain. Well, for me it is anyway. I guess some people might get to know all the answers to these bigger questions, but yeah, he just says basically, he feels this experience has been his calling to change the way he functions, and feels that his mission is to better mankind in some way, but he's still kind of searching for what that actually means, and he doesn't quite get what happened in his experience. And they said, okay, well, you've got to go back because you've got some important work to do. He's still trying to establish what that exactly is. But he kind of feels he has a fairly good idea as to what that actually is, and it's basically as simple as sharing what has happened to him. Like a lot of people who've had a near-death experience do, they come back with a renewed vigor for life and a way, just a new purpose, and often that entails sharing what has happened to them, and that's great. It's great for people like me because I love to hear about these experiences. I cannot get enough of them, and that is why I do a podcast on them, because they're all amazing to me, and even though some are easier to read and more interesting than others, they're all a little piece of the puzzle, and the more pieces of the puzzle you can put together, the better the picture you get of what this universe is like. It's obviously a massive, complex connection of beings and experiences that is going to be impossible to get your head around in one little human lifetime. But you've got to start and try somehow. So yeah, this is what I like to do. And then he has a bit of a paragraph on love here, which I can't get enough of that myself. I think like that's a lot of what most humans crave is love, and that's probably why I like hearing about it so much. So he says that love can do many things. He says that the love of these past family members he's grateful for because they gave him this experience of what is in store and what the light is like. Um, yeah, and he just says, look, it's important to be positive because we are all at our core just little bits of energy that can cause other people to experience life in a certain way. And I think what he's saying there is that, your energy, your state of being, your thoughts, even though they seem very internalized and separate, they do affect other people. And we all know that. We can walk into a room and we can usually tell when someone's in a negative way, they're in a bad mood, they're tired, they're grumpy, which, it's fine. It happens to all of us. But I think, what I'm saying here is we can all pick up when someone has a more negative inner state, and when you do come into contact with someone like that, it is, it, it's less easy to be around than when they're in a positive, welcoming, connecting frame of mind. And there's nothing wrong with being withdrawn and negative. It just, it is a little bit contagious. And I guess if we can all work on our positivity and self-love a little bit more, then the world will be a slightly better place. But yeah, I think we're a long way off from being perfect. It's hard to maintain that state because you're living life. You're a human. You're in this environment where challenges and negative stuff is going to throw that positive frame of mind out at any stage, and it's difficult to maintain that loving attitude on a 24/7 basis, just for all sorts of reasons. And, challenges are one of them, and just the normal process of being a human, the fatigue and the cycles. It's almost like you're just on this constant roller coaster that you'll go from a more pleasant state to a lower state, back to a pleasant one, and just it relentlessly rolls on. But yeah, that's the end of Robert's experience. I don't really have much more to add other than keep being yourself, keep being, the amazing person you are. I'm thrilled to have you on this journey with me, even if it's just for this one episode. It's good to have the opportunity to share what I love to learn about, and hopefully it creates a bit of interest in you, and even if I'm not the person to bring you, even if I'm not the person you want to continue this journey on with spiritually, there's plenty more out there that can give you insight on this topic. And quick Google on YouTube, or even there's many podcasts on this topic as well. So yeah, if you're more interested in hearing it from the person who actually experienced it themselves, there's a couple out there. There's one called Love Covered Life is one. You can probably find that on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And another good one is Next Level Soul. That's another podcast where the guy interviews people about their experiences. And yeah, for me, I love hearing about what has happened to someone from the person themselves. I will try and get a few new people to interview next year. I'm just kind of having an easy couple of weeks as the year winds up. But yeah, I will look to interview some more people who have had near-death experiences next year, and so keep an eye out for that. But yeah, there is a couple of interviews I've got on this podcast if you want to go and have a listen to people who have had some pretty cool experiences. But yeah, I'll look to add to that in 2024. So I'll leave you with my love and gratitude for joining me again and for getting through to the end. And thank you very much. And I will talk to you next week. Goodbye.